Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming. Today we're going to be talking about winning with Harlequins competitive 10th edition Warhammer 40k with a battle report today against a more mobile army in Necrons Hypercrypt. Now, first things first, we want to go over the list. Now, after the last update points increases, we did have to make a change. And the only change that I saw that did not really change the functionality of this list was removing the Death Jester and replacing him with another Troop Master. D cannons ended up going up from 125 to 135, and Swooping Hawks went from 75 points to 80 points, leaving our past list 40 points over. So what we're running with today is a Solitaire, 3 Troop Masters, 5 troop units with fusion pistols, Star Weavers, 3 Falcons, 3 D Cannons, 2 units of Skyweavers with Haywire and Star Bolus, and 2 units of Swooping Hawks. Now we went down from 19 total units to 18, and we are at 1,990 points. Now, I tried my best to find a Necron Hypercrypt opponent, and it took a little bit longer than I was expecting, but here's where we're at. We have Imhotep the Stormlord, Nightbringer, a Void Dragon, a Transcendent Catan, 2 Chronomancers to go in 10-man Immortal units. One has Dimensional Overseer, which I believe lets them pick up an extra unit each turn, and then the Osteoclave Fulcrum, which gives a unit deep strike. So one of these immortal units can just show up anywhere each turn. They have a Canoptic Scarab Swarm, 3 individual Locust Destroyer units at 30 points apiece. That's kind of wild. A Locust Heavy Destroyer, and a Monolith. Now they have 12 units total at 2,000 points on the nose, but most of this is the trashiest of trash. I believe we only have 6 real units to contend with: the Immortals, the Catan, and the Monolith. Now we'll be playing Mission E, Take and Hold, and Sweeping Engagement on GW Terrain Layout 2. Now, as far as our deployment, we pretty much did what we would normally do. And now, technically, this is my first game against Hypercrypt Necrons, and I mean technically because we did have to re-rack this after we began our initial first game because it did not go very well for our opponent. Originally, he ended up deep striking the Monolith up front here on his turn 1, and got blown out of the water by everything we had with the squad of Immortals. It was just a real bad feels moment for them. So we re-racked it and adjusted some deployment strategies. Now he has a Transcendent Catan over on the corner, a Heavy Destroyer back here, a unit of Immortals back here as well. We also have the Void Dragon over here, ready to just kind of charge this objective or this objective. We have Imhotep the Stormlord and another Locust Destroyer over here, and then another Locust Destroyer on the objective himself. The Monolith is pretty much out of sight of almost everything. A Canoptic Scarab Swarm up front to maybe move towards the center objective and do any secondaries he may need. Then we have a unit of Immortals and the Nightbringer back here, as well as another Locust Destroyer to hold this objective. On our side of things, I had not really played against Hypercrypt. I thought they would be a little bit more mobile than they actually are. So I just went again with the tried and true symmetry approach. Again, we have a Falcon, a Star Weaver, Skyweavers on one flank, Falcon, Star Weaver, Skyweavers towards the middle. We have another Falcon on this flank, just seeing the Nightbringer here, and I didn't realize that these Catan don't have deep strike, so they're really only coming in off board edges. Being able to control this flank seemed like a pretty good idea. We have our Swooping Hawks over here as well, in case we have to come out and move block, or if we just want to screen the Monolith from being able to 3-inch deep strike onto any portion of our battlefield, and then these Swooping Hawks can get picked up anywhere else. Our D cannons are staged right in the middle, so we can move them up and get really good lines of sight, or not lines of sight, engagement range on our opponent. We should be able to cover this objective here and over here. This D cannon I positioned here to be able to move out because we have this big gap. He may want a deep strike. If I get the first turn, I am just going to move the D cannon out and overwatch whatever drops into us. Now we rolled garbage on our first Fate dice attempt. We rolled a 6 and 5 2s, which was wild. That's never happened to me. We re-rolled again and ended up getting a 3, 3 5s, and a 6 afterwards. Now we roll the dice again. Harlequins get the first turn, and we really just stage all of our units. Over here, We end up moving the Falcon up to get a line of sight on the Void Dragon. I know there's a little bit of parallax here, but trust me, he did have line of sight into this. We move the Star Weaver up to hold this objective. If something happens for some reason, we still have that protection and we get OC on that objective. Otherwise, I can just launch my Harlequins out towards this midfield portion here. And then we have the Skyweavers. There is absolutely zero reason at this point to expose our Skyweavers to anything with the monolith being around. I think they'll be one of our best assets. We do move this D cannon into the open right here so we can overwatch any targets that come in. We leave the Skyweavers the same. Falcon moves up just a little bit. Starweaver stays where it was. Then we move this unit of Swooping Hawks up to try to screen our opponent from using that 3-inch deep strike over here in this portion of our battlefield. The Falcon comes out to try to get a cheeky angle on the monolith down here. We fire a few shots. Everything bounces. The Void Dragon takes a few wounds. I think he took 5 or 6 from the Falcon, which was very, very nice. But that half damage and the feel no pain feels really, really bad. Shoving a 6 on a D cannon or a Bright Lance into one of these could realistically result in you still only doing 2 or 3 wounds. Now, our opponent on turn 1 really just chose violence, pushing everything forward as quickly as they could. They advanced the Transcendent Catan from over here up to this angle, got some shots on the Falcon, did a couple wounds. Void Dragon came up, put the shots on the Falcon, got a couple wounds there. Immortals followed up behind. The Monolith picked up at the end of my turn 1, came down using the 3-inch deep strike rule right over here, holding this objective, and then bringing the Immortals in as well. And the Nightbringer picked up and came 9.1 inches away from this Falcon up here. Now, the Monolith in shooting put everything, Death Rays, a Particle Whip into the Falcon. We used lightning fast reflexes to give -1 to hit, so the Monolith was only hitting on 4s at this point, and we're getting cover. 3 Death Rays ended up hitting, 2 wounded, and then we used one of our 6s in Fate Dice to soak up the damage from the rest of it. Ended up only taking, I believe, 3 wounds from the Death Rays, but the Particle Whip did a few extra there as well. I think we left this Falcon on just 2 wounds at the end of all of shooting. The Nightbringer bounced, and he split fire with these Immortals, hoping to get a few of those lethal hits in, and it just didn't take. The other Immortals fired into the Swooping Hawks. We took 4 wounds. We removed 2 from the Exarch and then 2 other Swooping Hawks, so we still have 2 here. Otherwise, we made it out of turn 1 without taking any substantial amounts of damage. In our opponent's charge phase, they had a 9-inch charge with the Nightbringer over here into the Falcon. They end up rolling an 11. They get in there no problem. Total the remaining wounds on the Falcon. Our troops get out more than 3 inches away, so we couldn't consolidate into us, and then we move on to the next turn. In our movement phase, we pretty much choose violence in return. So we move everything up to get angles wherever we can. We are going to fight it out and hope that we're the last remaining. Now, the Monolith did end up using the 4+ invulnerable stratagem. So this is going to be a little bit of a tough fight, but hopefully we get through it. We shift our Swooping Hawks back here out to this line so they can put some fire onto the Nightbringer. Our troops ended up moving up a little bit closer on this edge to the Nightbringer beforehand. This unit of troops got out of the Star Weaver and is attempting to move into the Nightbringer as well. We had our troops get out of the Falcon and move up to this position here. Hopefully, if we need to, we can end up charging the Monolith to finish it off, or just dive deep into these Immortals. Our Swooping Hawks here stayed right where they were. I didn't want to risk a real easy overwatch against them. 6 Harlequins with invulnerable saves against the Immortals is not so bad, but I think they could pick up these Swooping Hawks pretty easily. Our Star Weavers or Sky Weavers also move to get angle and lines on the Monolith. We move our other Sky Weavers up over here. Only one of them was able to get enough range onto the Monolith. The other is going to end up having to shoot over here. We get our troops out of the Falcon on this side and push up towards the Void Dragon. Our other troops get out of the Star Weaver and push up towards this side. And then we move the Star Weaver itself there in case we do charge and eliminate one of these units, or if we decide we don't need to charge, we can just get back in that Star Weaver and have some protection at the end of the turn. Now, we still have no prisoners as our secondary, so our goal is to kill everything we possibly can this turn. Our other secondary objective was engage on all fronts, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get that this turn, so we are behind on secondaries. But it went pretty well. We ended up moving everyone out here. The Swooping Hawks and this unit of Harlequins ended up putting 4 wounds on the Nightbringer. This unit of Harlequins shot everything they could into the Nightbringer and did absolutely nothing. This unit of Harlequins fired fusion pistols into the monolith. Our Falcon, our D cannons, and our Skyweavers over here all fired into the monolith as well, doing some really, really good work. We ended up doing 6 devastating wounds with these Skyweavers. We did 7 wounds with D cannon. We did another 6 wounds with the Falcon, I believe, total through all of its shooting. So we ended up bringing the monolith down to about 1 wound. Now, I didn't want to shoot into the Immortals before dropping the monolith because I was afraid they were going to use the strat to pull the Immortals out of engagement range where I wouldn't be able to charge them this following turn. Fortunately for us, they didn't, but they did have the -1. I'm sorry, not -1 to wound. They were getting cover from everything, and they had a 4-up invulnerable save. Now, on the other side, we used one of these Skyweavers to shoot into the monolith, did another 3 wounds. And this Skyweaver fired into the Void Dragon. Now, the Falcon put its Bright Lance and its Pulse Laser into the Void Dragon himself, ended up bringing it down to about 4 wounds combined with the fusion pistols from this Harlequin unit. This unit and the Skyweaver fired into the Transcendent Catan as well as the Shuriken Cannon from this Falcon, and we brought that down to 6 wounds total. Moving into the charge phase, let's see what happens. In our charge phase, we try to pick up everything that we can. Both units of Harlequin troops make their charge into the Nightbringer. They do not have enough to bring it down. Without the rerolls, unfortunately, the troop aren't as great as they could be. We bring it down to a couple wounds. He gets to swing back and wipes almost an entire unit of our troops, leaves a lead player and the troop master. Afterwards, we charge our unit of Harlequins over here, getting rerolls into the monolith. We put the troop master in the monolith, everything else into the Immortals. We end up dropping 3 Immortals and the monolith itself. In that attack on the swing back, the Immortals end up killing 1 of our troop. Over here, we put both units into both Catan, with the troop master from the Falcon also going into the Transcendent Catan. Really how this ended up working out is we easily dropped the Void Dragon, and then the Transcendent Catan ended up taking only 2 wounds. So we made it out of this turn. We tied up the Transcendent Catan. We tied up the Nightbringer. They cannot pick them up, and we destroyed the monolith. I would say it's a pretty successful turn 2 for us. On our opponent's turn 2, they draw Deploy Teleport Homers and Defend Stronghold, both really, really easy secondaries they can get. They end up scoring 6 points for the turn there. They shift the Immortals up, and then they use a move and scoot afterwards. They fall back with the Transcendent Catan over here. The Immortals stay put. The Nightbringer stays put. The Destroyers move up to get some lines of sight, and the other Destroyer stays right where he is. In the shooting portion of it, we do 5 wounds total from the Immortals that can see the Starweaver. The others shoot into this troop here. They wipe out the entire troop except for the troop master. These Locust Destroyers fire into the Starweaver, and this Locust Heavy Destroyer fires into the Starweaver as well. Starweaver ends up living on 1 wound, which is very, very nice for us over there. Otherwise, there isn't too much happening in the shooting phase. In the charge phase, they charge the Immortals into both of these Harlequin units, hoping to wipe them out. They end up bringing down one of these squads to just the troop master. Right over here, they end up killing another few out of the other squad itself. Those 4-up invulnerables sometimes just do a lot of work. On the flip side, these Immortals end up wiping out almost an entire unit of Harlequins, leaving, again, just another lead player and a troop master. They do not do much in the kickback. I think at the end of the day, they're still up 1 model than they were last turn after they brought back some units. This Nightbringer ends up wiping one of our troop units, the full unit entirely, and then we get the swing back. The Nightbringer is still alive. Now, on the top of turn 3, we end up drawing Tempting Target and Storm Hostile Objective, which is really kind of a godsend for us. We only scored 4 points on secondaries this entire turn. So we move our Swooping Hawks up. They pass their Battle Shock test to this objective, and we just use a single D cannon to kill this Locust Destroyer over here. That was pretty easy. We fall back with everything else. We fall back from the Nightbringer. We used Feign Retreat to fall back over here from these Immortals. We end up moving our Solitaire up over on this side, and then we fall back all of our troops that were engaged in combat with the Immortals. Now, one troop made it out. The troop master himself failed the desperate escape and died, but that is okay because we want to be able to shoot the Immortals this turn. We end up shifting our Falcon over here to get line of sight on the Transcendent Catan or any of the Immortals that are staging over here. We fire both of the Falcons into the Transcendent Catan. They do enough wounds to end up bringing him down. And then everything else just fires into the Immortals. We bring them down to 2 remaining at the end of the day. It's looking pretty good for us. Our other 2 D cannons fire into the Nightbringer, I believe, and we are able to bring him down in conjunction with a Skyweavers. Now, moving into the end of the game, all we really needed to do was charge our Solitaire into this last unit of Immortals, and it was pretty much over. We ran the next turn for our opponent, and he ended up getting Bring It Down and no prisoners. He brought down a Starweaver, got 5 points on secondary, and another 5 points on primary. But it was pretty much over. On our following turn, we drew Investigate Signals and Area Denial. Getting an 11 on our secondaries was pretty nice. And then the turn after that, we get Secure No Man's Land and Capture Enemy Outpost for 13. So we end up coming 2 points shy of maxing out on our secondaries despite only scoring 4 points in our first 2 turns. But really, this game didn't turn out the way either of us expected. Now, we had that, re-rack from the beginning, but I thought that Necrons were going to be much more mobile than they were, but those Catan not having Deep Strike makes a really big difference. It allows us to dictate where we choose to fight on the board, and having these D cannons here really de-incentivizes our opponent to bringing the monolith or anything towards this objective. It was a tough game. I don't know what else they could have done. Realistically, if he played a little cagey and maybe just went to score 10s the entire game, he could have scored a 40 on primary over here. If he wanted to just park the Nightbringer or the Void Dragon on one of these objectives, D cannons are not going to bring them down over the course of a game just because they do the half damage and the Feel No Pain and the 4+ invuln. But then what are we doing? We start to move up to the board any point where he needed to cleanse or deploy teleport homers or extend battle lines or storm hostile objective would have been very, very difficult. And we can play that waiting game. I can shift out a cheap unit, a 75-point unit, to score on an objective or hold OC, and we have Phantasm to move them back. We just really have the ability to collapse in on any portion of the board if they get greedy. So I do not believe Hypercrypt Necrons is a bad matchup, but realistically, Vanguard Space Marines were much more difficult than this. I think we have a lot of strengths against Hypercrypt Necrons. Maybe not Canoptive Court. I know those rates are pretty tough. I'll look for a matchup there as well, but we trade very well into their units. We have phenomenal anti-vehicle for the Monolith. I don't care about the 4+ invuln. Most of the wounds that we're doing are coming from mortals or devastating. Our indirect fire is really effective against their cheap scoring units. One shot brings down a destroyer, totals that whole objective. We have tons of screening. So again, we can dictate where our opponent can go and what we want to do when we want to fight. We have some Melta to get around the Catan. Realistically, they're not bad, but most of the time we're only doing 3 damage a pop. So if we're not bringing them down over the course of a turn, it's very difficult still to bring down the Catan. Our troops with rerolls versus the Catan, though, coming in with those devastating wounds, those single damage, +1 to wound, does a lot of work. I was shocked at how well Swooping Hawks did into Catan. And then at the end of it, we just have too many activations. When they only have, 6 real units to bring down anything, Starweavers become a big, big problem, and so do Falcons. The only real weaknesses we have is that our Falcons and our D cannons are entirely ineffective against Catan. As we talked about a little bit earlier, even if we wanted to, shove a 6 into our Fate Dice to do 8 damage, they're cutting that damage in half, then they're rolling the Feel No Pains. Afterwards, we may walk away with something like 2 or 3 damage. and it just feels bad on our side. So sticking to a lot of our single damage fire on those C'tans seems a lot better. The Skyweavers are kind of pointless beyond the Monolith. They're not super bad into the Immortals, but they're not great either. After the Monolith goes away, you pretty much just use them to score objectives and tie up enemy units if you really needed to. Now, the scoreboard at the end of it all, this is inaccurate. It ended up being 98 to 46. We did not count as primary on that final turn. But it was nice to see that we didn't have to push too heavy into our first couple turns to come out with a win in the end. It's just kind of being patient and engaging when you need to, especially against these elite armies. But thank you again. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this helps bring those Harlequins off the shelves. We can show the world what we're really made of at this point in time. I really appreciate you watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Any bit of help means the world, especially for a new gaming channel like this. Beyond that, if there are any games that you want to see posted, please let me know. The reason we did this Necrons game is from a comment in the comments section. But I appreciate you. If you have any list ideas you'd like me to build around or try, I'm more than happy to do that as well. Again, I haven't had this much fun playing Warhammer in a very, very, very long time. Take care.